Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, and this is Comic Class, and on today's episode, we are going to tackle one of the largest issues in the world of comics. I've been researching this topic for months now, and after all this time, I think I finally stumbled upon something big, massive, mind-blowing. We have been dancing around this subject for the longest time now, but we can't ignore it any further. Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode of Comic Class, we are going to talk about, hey, would you look at the time? It's October 1st, everyone, which means, as a YouTuber, I am legally prohibited from talking about anything that isn't spooky or scary for the entire month. Yes, for anybody who is new to this channel and wasn't with us in previous years, every single October, this channel turns into Thorgiween, a month-long celebration of everything spooky and scary. And when it comes to comics, there is no shortage of horror books out there to talk about. However, every single Thorgiween, we also pick a theme to follow. And this year's theme is the apocalypse. Not because of anything going on in the world right now, it's just a total coincidence. We just picked it at random. It's not relating to anything. You're all thinking about this far too much. Now, when it comes to comics, what are some good books that involve the apocalypse? What are some good horror comics that involve the apocalypse? Ah, yes, there we go. The Apocalypse Trilogy by James Tynion and Eryk Donovan. Now, a lot of people out there know James Tynion as the current writer on Batman, as well as several other titles over at DC Comics. However, before he blew up over there, he did a lot of indie books, and most of them revolved around horror. And I gotta say, for anybody who only knows his superhero stuff and has never checked out his earlier stuff, this guy is a master horror writer. If you want something that's just going to send chills up your spine, James Tynion is one of the best writers in the business today. And it's not like he stopped. He still makes time to write horror comics. His latest series, Something is Killing the Children, was one of our favorite books of last year, and we made sure to spotlight in last year's Thorgiween. However, I feel like for this year, we should go back and spotlight some of his earlier works. About 5 years ago, he wrote a 3-part storyline called Mimetic for Boom Comics, and it blew up. It won all kinds of awards, got him all kinds of praise, so he and his co-creator Eryk Donovan decided to turn that into a trilogy, in which they would release 3 different series for Boom Comics, all focusing on the apocalypse. Now, we have talked about Mimetic before on this channel, but we never really talked about any of the other series that he did. So today, we're going to take a look at each of these 3 series. Enjoy! The first book that we're going to talk about is Mimetic. However, I'm not going to talk about this one for that long. And the reason why I'm not going to talk about this one for that long is because I love this book. And you might think, well, if you love this book, why aren't you going to talk about more? Because I love this book so much, we've kind of already talked about it several times on this channel, in fact. When this book came out, it was on our top 100 comics of the year list. And then when we did our very first Thorgiween, it was one of the books that we spotlighted. So if you are a longtime fan of this channel, you've already heard me talk about this numerous times at this point. However, for the new fans out there, I do have to come in here and just praise this book one more time. I do have to try and expose as many people as I can to this series, because even all these years later, it still blows me away how effective this series is, because I'll be honest with you, this is not my personal favorite horror comic of all time. However, it definitely is the scariest horror comic I've ever read. Now, this book is all about a college student who wakes up one morning and his roommate tells him that he has found the most amazing meme online. And he shows his roommate this meme, and it's just a picture of a sloth giving a thumb up with all these swirling circles behind him. And the college student that we're following is colorblind. And he looks at this image and he goes, yeah, okay, I guess it's kind of nice. I don't really see what the big deal is with it. However, every single other person on the planet who sees this thing, they become entranced with it. They become obsessed with it. They talk about how just looking at it makes them feel better, makes them feel like they're being uplifted. It makes them feel like something special is happening. And then 24 hours after they see this image, it drives them insane. And not just like a zombie apocalypse. I'm talking they're running around destroying everything, screaming at the top of their lungs. It is just pure chaos. And that is the most frightening thing about this book, is that this is a series that is meant to kind of capture that horror of how quickly information can spread these days, about how quickly something can go up online and then within hours the entire world is talking about. And it essentially asks the question, what if some kind of madness, something beyond our understanding, something that was out to destroy us, could spread that quickly? And that is why this series was so terrifying to me, because as soon as things start going down in this book, they are able to capture that terror of there's no place that's safe, there's no way to run from this, it is everywhere. Everyone has seen this. Everyone who has a phone, everyone who has looked at a television screen, they have seen this. And now, once people start going crazy from this, everybody starts asking themselves, oh God, that person saw it 2 hours before me. Does that mean that I only have 2 hours left until I start acting like that? And as I said, this is part of what Tynion has referred to as the Apocalypse Collection. And the fact that this shows the entire world just being destroyed by this meme, which is a crazy sense, but they are able to sell it by playing it so straight. The fact that they show the world being destroyed that quickly, that was just chilling to me. And I remember reading this on the subway after I got off work one day, and I was riding back home, and as soon as I finished reading it, I had that little thought in the back of my head, oh God, what's gonna happen 24 hours after I finished reading this book? Is something gonna happen to me? Am I going to go crazy after reading this? Because it's able to just put you in this world, and it's able to make this world feel so real. And even though it's only 3 issues and everything goes crazy after issue number 1, they are still able to turn to the audience and go, yeah, you know that if something like this were to happen, if there was something like a zombie virus that could spread just through social media, you know it would go down this quick. And you know that there would be no place to escape from it. And it makes you start thinking about that. But it goes beyond just being a zombie virus, for lack of better terms, and it starts to grow, and it starts to develop, and eventually becomes this eldritch horror. It becomes something that words can't describe. If you're one of those people out there who love things like Lovecraft or J-horror like Uzumaki or The Ring, which they even said that that was part of their inspiration, and if you've read Uzumaki, you can look at the spirals behind the sloth in that design and go, oh, I see where you got that from. But if you are a fan of those types of stories where nobody really wins, just sort of everything goes horrible, and it's just a question of how long does it take before everything goes horrible. If you're a fan of those types of stories, oh my goodness, you are going to love Mimetic. Because it slowly begins to grow from just being this image to being like a religion, to being something that isn't just transferred via sight, but now people are being warped and they're being twisted into weird, strange creations just from seeing it, and that's causing their voice to change, and now their voice is able to transfer this virus onto other people. So there's this whole level of body horror thrown in there as well, and it takes that idea that you can't run and you can't escape from this thing and continues to increase it more and more and more. And I don't want to spoil where the story ends up going, but by the time that I got to the very end of this book, when I read the final issue of it and I saw the final page, listen, it was great. It was a really good finale, but man, I kind of had to just put the book down and just think, I really wish I had not seen that, because I know I'm going to see it again in my nightmares. It was one of those endings where as soon as you finish it, you don't really want to go out there and tell other people about. You kind of just want to sit there and just sort of think about everything that you just went through. But at the same time, you really don't want to think about, because oh my goodness, is it depressing and scary and horrifying. Yeah, it's one of those endings, and I know to a lot of people out there, I'm not really selling it. But to that one specific audience, that audience that this book was made for, I hope you are hearing these words and thinking, oh yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm into. because that's exactly who this book is made for. So yes, Mimetic was an amazing beginning to this Apocalypse Trilogy, which in all fairness, I keep calling it the Apocalypse Trilogy, but I think it only became a trilogy because this book was so successful. I think this was meant to be a one-off story. I don't think that they ever had other stories planned after this. But after this book won all kinds of awards, got tons of critical praise, yeah, I can understand why the creators came in here and said, oh, well, we have to do this again. And they came back with a book called Cognetic. And while this book still follows the theme of it revolving around the end of the world, and it is still a horror series, it is a very different kind of horror series. It does still share many elements with Mimetic. There's a lot of body horror in here. There's a lot of giant mounds of human beings all coming together, which, yeah, it's kind of weird that that's a theme that went from one book to the next. And there is also the theme of something controlling these humans. However, beyond that, it is a completely different type of story. In fact, Cognetic, it is a horror book, but it's a horror book in the same way that Akira is horror. Cognetic is a series about immortals, but it's not immortals like people who live forever. They're more of mental immortals. They're people who they are able to transfer their consciousness from one human being to another, and they have existed since the dawn of time, just swapping from one body to the next. And eventually, one day, one of them just decides, you know what, I'm kind of done with this. I'm kind of just bored. I've lived for a long time. It's time that we just end all this. So they start spraying themselves out. So far, these immortals have lived this long from just jumping from one person to the next. But this one immortal decides, yeah, I'm just going to continuously jump from people, but not leave the person I'm in. So I'm just going to keep taking control of people. And one day, they just climb to the top of the Empire State Building and just start taking control of people. They take control of everyone inside the building, and that slowly begins to spread and starts to go out to everybody else across the island of Manhattan. And it focuses on one of the other immortals who now has to try and stop their brother. And this book has a lot of effective elements. I went back and I reread it right before doing this review, and honestly, I forgot how many spooky images were in here. I forgot how much the imagery really does sell the horror elements of this book, because I mostly just remembered the story elements, and story-wise, yeah, if you are terrified by the idea of something like the apocalypse, then that element is still there. If you are terrified by the idea of something larger than any human being could ever hope to combat is out there, and it can take control of you at any time, you know, that fear of some kind of a godly being that is above any of you and you can't stop them. Yeah, if you have that fear, that is present in this book. However, the story of it in and of itself, it's not really that focused on the humans. They do try to add something of a human element in there. The heroic immortal that we're following, they do have human connections. They do have humans that they care about. So you do get a little bit invested in them, but mostly this is you just watching two superpowered beings duke it out. Which I say that and it almost sounds like I'm describing Dragon Ball. I'm describing people flying around and throwing energy blasts at each other. No. Remember, the power that they have is that they can take control of other people. So this is essentially you just watching giant masses of people who have had their entire existence erased from them and are now just puppets fighting each other. And yeah, that is fairly intimidating. That is somewhat scary. But as far as us rooting for any human beings in here, there aren't really a lot of them to find. You are mostly just watching two godly beings duke it out, and it does still create a little bit of a horrifying image in your head of, oh, what if I was a human in this situation? What if I was just an ant compared to these two giants? And I could just easily be crushed underneath any of them, and it wouldn't even matter. I'm just a speck of dust compared to what's going on here. That is effective, but isn't nearly as effective as how in Mimetic, you had human protagonists who you could kind of see yourselves within. That level of relatability is kind of gone from Cognetic. And I've always said that when it comes to horror, relatability is a very important element. But I almost feel like on some level, the relatability is supposed to be gone from Cognetic because, as I said, the big fear from this situation is that feeling that you are so small compared to these two ancient beings who are fighting that you don't really matter and you wouldn't be able to contribute to this in any way other than just having your existence erased and being another meat puppet that is thrown at another meat puppet controlled by another one of these immortals. So maybe the fact that there isn't really any human in here for you to grow connected to was on purpose? I don't know, it's kind of interesting. The more I go back and I look at this, the more I realize that there might have been a couple different layers to this story that I missed the first time around. The horror element might have gone a little bit deeper than I expected, but I definitely don't think that it's as effective as Mimetic, mostly just because, as I said, it is lacking that relatability, but also because, well, humans going up against something that you can't even describe is very terrifying. Two immortals duking it out, that's got a little bit of like an action element to it. If you took out the body horror of this, and you took out some of the really disturbing images of death in the very first issue, I could almost see this being like an action book. If this got adapted into a movie, I could see them just completely screwing this up and, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is now our protagonist, and they have to go in there and stop these two immortals that are fighting each other. Yeah, I could see many ways that this could go wrong, but when it comes to Mimetic, yeah, that is pure horror absolutely in every single page. And next we come to Eugenic, which is a very different type of apocalypse. This is almost like two apocalypse stories in the span of 3 issues. What this is about is it stars a scientist who he's kind of just gotten sick of the world, as most scientists in horror stories tend to do. And he's decided, you know what, there's so much war, there's so much fighting, there's so much on this planet that is just ripping us apart, and it's because we're all different. So what I've done is I've created a virus, and that virus is going to go out, it's going to infect everyone out there. And all of your children are going to be born exactly the same. They're going to be born as these giant purple creatures whose faces are distorted and they're warped and twisted and just nightmare fuel. And he shows this room full of people the creations that he has made, what their children are going to look like, and the entire room looks at it and goes, "Oh my God, you monster, why would you do that to our children?" And I will be real with you, Mimetic, I read every single issue of that as it came out. Cognetic, I read every single issue of that as it came out. Eugenic, I read the first issue, and yeah, big shout out to Eryk Donovan, because their artwork is so disturbing that it packed a punch in those first 2 stories, but in Eugenic, these creatures that they created, I just looked at that and went, I don't know if I can deal with 2 more issues of this. I had to take a break. I did not return to this series until it was all wrapped up, and even then I waited an extra month afterwards before I went back into that thing. But all these other scientists are looking at the mad scientists and they're saying to them, "That's insane, how could you do this? We will never let this happen." And he just pulls an Ozymandias and is like, I already released this, and it's in the air and it's spreading quickly. Every single person on the planet is going to be giving birth to these creatures, and they are going to be the new race that takes over this planet. And then it just ends on that. It ends with this room full of people just choking on this virus, and it is one of the most hopeless endings to a first issue I have ever felt. With Mimetic, yeah, it lets you know, man, everything is screwed and there is no place you can run, but you still hold out that little bit of hope. Issue number 1 ends where most of these other stories would have ended on the final chapter. And then it just goes and asks, okay, well now what happened? And now we see 200 years later, and yeah, the human population is down to like 16% of what it once was, and this new race of creatures called the Newmen, I'm sorry, I just had a quick Seinfeld flashback there.
Hello, Jerry.
Hello, Newman.
The Newmen have now taken over, and they are now the superior race, and they have forced all the humans into these little slums, and they keep telling these humans, you know what, if you're smart enough, and if you're genetically stable enough, and if you've got the right traits, then maybe you can come and live with us. You can come and live on our beautiful, amazing land, and you can entertain us and work with us. Or if you don't want to do that, then we just sterilize you, and we send you to a farm upstate. And this follows this one rebel who knows something is up, and they one day broadcast to the entire planet the truth about what's going on, about how there is no beautiful, peaceful land for all the humans. No, the humans they're basically bred with the Newmen to try and create something in between, but that something in between is unstable, and they're just horrific monsters. Yeah, if you are not into body horror, oh, you might want to just skip this one. It is rough. I am not the biggest fan of body horror. Out of all the brands of horror that I enjoy, it is definitely way down the list. I had to look at some of these pages with my eyes half closed, just focusing real closely on the word bubbles. Man. It was rough getting through this one, but not because it was bad, but because it is really leaning into something that I am not that comfortable with. So chapter 2 then ends with this big look at a potential war between the remaining humans and the Newmen. And then you jump ahead by another 200 years for the final issue of Eugenic. And now all the humans are gone. Well, they're not entirely gone. They've now kind of just been bred into being pets. They no longer know how to talk. They now are basically just dumb animals that the Newmen keep because they found them to be cute. And we follow one Newman who they run a museum that is dedicated to the history of humans. And they love the humans. They think that what the humans once had was amazing. And this entire final issue is some little kid coming into the museum for humans. And this one Newman is explaining to them the history of humans and why they were better than the Newmen. And at the end of all this, they just, well, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but it's a real Twilight Zone ending, is what it is. And that's the best thing that I can say about Eugenic, is that this almost feels like it was James Tynion and Eryk Donovan trying to do their own personal take on a Twilight Zone story. On one of those stories where they have the setup, and then they do the twist, and then it all comes back around to stare at the audience and go, yeah, think about that. And I think on many levels, this worked. It honestly reminded me of that old Twilight Zone episode, In the Eye of the Beholder, I believe it was called, where, spoiler alert for this 60-year-old episode of the Twilight Zone, but there was this woman who was getting plastic surgery because her face was so hideous that they had to come in here and try and mold her face so that it could be acceptable to the human population. And throughout the entire episode, we just see her face covered in bandages and we don't see anybody else in there. And then at the very end of it, they take the bandages off and she's this beautiful woman and everyone says, oh my God, you're hideous. And then it's revealed all the other people in the hospital have these weird pig monkey faces. And it's revealed that's what beauty is in this world. And this woman, who to our society would be considered to be typically beautiful, in this society is considered to be hideous. It's that same kind of thing. It really did remind me of that. My only problem is that the moral of Eugenic is that our differences make us better. The fact that we are different from each other is what makes the human race so special, and that is an amazing message. I agree with that message. I think that is a great message. I'm glad they put that message in this book. And issue 1 and issue 2, that message is handled very, very well. Issue 3 is nothing but a text dump. The entirety of issue number 3 is just this Newman just turning to the audience and saying, our differences make us better. We're missing so many things in this new society by not having any differences, and we should embrace our differences. And I kept looking at it going, yeah, man, we got it. We understood that was the premise of this book by the end of issue number 1. I mean, hell, if you didn't get by the end of issue number 2, then I don't know what to tell you, because in issue number 2, they were kind of already turning to the audience and just saying, yeah, this is what this is about. But they were still, having it play into the story. In issue number 3, there is no story anymore. It is just them turning to the audience and just walls and walls of text talking about why our differences make us better, why our differences are good. And like I said, that is an amazing message. I think it is great. That was the message of this story. but it does kind of fall apart at the end because, as I said, it doesn't even feel like there's a story anymore. It feels like it is just a wall of text at this point, just telling us the things that we, the audience, already understood. And it almost kind of feels to me like it almost feels a little bit disrespectful to the audience. Like they were afraid that the audience wasn't going to understand what the lesson of this story was, what the moral of it was. And all you think was, yeah, man, your audience is smart enough to get. Your audience understood. So I do think that this is a very good story, but the final issue gets a little bit lazy with it, and it doesn't really handle the story with the same level of tact as the other issues of this series, or any of the other issues of this Apocalypse Trilogy. So even though on paper I enjoy what they did with this final issue, I think execution-wise, it was a little bit sloppy. But in the end, I do still think that James Tynion and Eryk Donovan's Apocalypse Trilogy is a big hit. As I said, Mimetic, a massive success from page 1 up until the final image at the end of issue number 3. And oh my gosh, I just thought about that final image again and oh, it's creepy. So yes, Mimetic, amazing. Cognetic, very different and doesn't quite really have that relatability element that Mimetic did, but it is still creative. It gets a little bit goofy at times with the big final battle. However, I do still think that it was able to capture a very different type of horror. And as for Eugenic, it is definitely going for that Twilight Zone style of horror, and I think that mostly it works, it just kind of falls apart in the final issue. So overall, even though there are a few problems in there, the Apocalypse Trilogy still gets a big thumbs up from me. If you want something this Halloween that is going to give you a lot of chills and thrills, all of these books are up on Comixology right now, and Mimetic and Cognetic are actually part of Comixology Unlimited at the moment, meaning if you have that membership, they're actually free. So you can just go ahead and just get yourself a copy of these books, just check them out, and you don't lose anything by doing it. So if you decide to check these books out, let me know what you thought about them in the comments down below, or if you have already read them, let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and this is just the first in our month of Comic Crypt, in which we are looking at spooky comic books every single episode. So make sure that you click that subscribe button and ring that bell so that way you see all these episodes. And if you like this video, then make sure that you share it around the web because it really does help our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and happy Halloween.